Welcome back to Yaya and Mimi on the AT. I am standing in my gear room right now and I wanted to show you the route that we took for our last section of the Appalachian Trail in Georgia. So this was our fourth weekend on the trail and we were able to finish it in 2 overnighters. So 4 days on the trail, 2 nights on the trail, and 1 night in a hotel room. So before each section, we would print off cards like this from the Appalachian Trail Guide, and we would write down that because we ended the last section at Trey Gap Mountain Road, which was a really cool adventure. And then we started at Trey Gap for this section, and we went halfway, and then we stayed at Addis Gap, and then we went the other half, and then we had Martin pick us up in the support van at Dix Creek Gap, and then we drove to a hotel, a local hotel there, and then the next day he took us back to the trail and dropped us back off at Dix Creek, and then we did 7.5 miles, and then the next day we did 8 miles, and we were able to pass the Georgia-North Carolina border, which was just indescribable joy for us to be able to finish a goal like that. And then we ended at Deep Gap, North Carolina, and Martin picked us up in the support van there. So the reason we planned it this way with a hotel room stay in the middle of our trip is because we hadn't really built up our trail resilience yet. We had gotten pretty good at an overnighter with 2 days on the trail and 1 night on the trail, with the amount of weight that you carry with food and extra clothing. And so as we were gaining experience, we felt like it was best to end this section on the Georgia-North Carolina border with an overnighter and then a hotel stay and then an overnighter, so that we had a chance to refresh and not have to carry 4 days worth of food. That way we only had to carry 2 days worth of food, and it gave us a chance to just get more acclimated to our gear and to kind of build up our endurance on the trail. So if you saw the end of our last adventure, our number 3 video, where we ended at Trey Mountain, we discovered that we would definitely need the aid of some shuttle drivers. And so we had been getting some advice from Ron, the shuttle driver, the AT shuttle driver, all along. He was telling us different tips and tricks that we could do. And this time we called and said, we need more than advice, we need a ride. And he's like, oh yeah, Trey Mountain's a hard one. It's a booger to get up there. And so we told him there was 4 of us and that we had full packs. And so he also gave us the name of his friend Brett, and Brett and Ron shuttled us up to Trey Mountain. They were very experienced, and they went right through all those puddles and over those the big ruts in the road, and they dropped us off and gave us a little bit of advice, gave us some candy, and shook our hands. We took a couple of pictures and off we went. And it was a really cold start, and we hiked that whole day and had some really beautiful views. We were going to stop at Sassafras, but then we felt like we could get further, and so we went to Addis Gap and spent the night at Addis Gap. At Addis Gap, the water source is like half a mile down this hill, and so we all set up camp, and then Blair took one for the team. He took off down there with all of our dirty water bags and filled them up, and we came back up and he filtered it for us. And we were able to have a campfire, and Lori and Amber were hammock camping, and Blair and I stayed in a tent. And that night we had our first curious coyote encounter, and that is where Lori got her name, her trail name, Coyote. But we had a great time around the campfire that night. We were able to use some of our new gear. We had some bad experience with some Mountain House meals giving us a little bit of heartburn, and so we made some of our own concoctions and put them in Ziploc freezer bags, and we were able to put them in some of these little cloth cozies to cook, and they were great. They worked out phenomenal. And then the next morning we got up and we hiked all the way to Dix Gap, and that is where Martin met us again, and he picked us up and we went to the hotel. And we aired out all of our stuff. There had gotten some dew and a little bit of rain. We were able to air out our tents and replenish our food and put on fresh clothes, which was great. And so we got back on the trail, but before we did, we stopped by Subway the next morning and grabbed Subway. We packed in Subway for our first lunch. It was great. Right before we stopped for lunch, we walked across this one ridgeline called Blue Ridge Gap, and I will never forget, it smelled just like Christmas. So there were some trees that had come down and there were pine cones everywhere, and that whole section of the trail smelled like Christmas. And Amber had this red shirt on that day, and she picked up a pine cone and one of the pine boughs, and we took a picture, and I just always look at that picture now and remember how much it smelled like Christmas. We again stopped for lunch and had our Subway, and then we continued on the trail. Later that afternoon and into the evening, we crossed the Georgia-North Carolina border, and I can barely describe the emotions that just rushed through my brain at that time. It was a ton of excitement, but it was also mixed with a little bit of sorrow as we thought about our mom. My mind was just filled with memories of her and how I know she would have been with us on the trail if she were still here. And I knew she was there with us in spirit. It was just a great experience. We stopped and took a lot of pictures, and we also signed her name on the registry once we got to Bly Gap. And it was a beautiful experience that I'll always remember. When we got down to Bly Gap, our feet were on fire. They were burning. We had, I think that was the longest day in mileage that we had had so far with full packs, and the terrain was pretty good, uphill and downhill, and so our feet were pretty sore. And so there's a little creek at the bottom of Bly Gap, and we took our shoes and socks off before going to the campsite that was up the little hill, and we stuck our feet in the creek. And even though it was cold outside, that cold creek water felt amazing. It was such a relief to when your feet are burning to be able to stick them in a cold creek. So then we put on our Crocs and we headed up that little hill and we set up camp. And we looked around and there was the one famous twisted tree. We took some pictures in front of that twisted tree, and then we went to settle down. That night, there was the most beautiful sunset. And in the morning was even a more gorgeous sunrise. And I just felt like that was my mom's way of letting us know that she was there. It was such a pretty night on the trail. The next morning, climbing out of Bly Gap was really steep. We had to help each other up. We probably should have taken our packs off and handed them up a couple of those sections because at one point we were like falling back, and Blair reached over and grabbed our packs and pulled us back. So it was really great to have a man on the trail those times when, because Amber's got really short legs, and so it was hard for her to get up those sections right there. But we hiked all the rest of that day and into North Carolina, and Martin met us with the support van at Deep Gap, North Carolina, and we had finished the Georgia section of the Appalachian Trail. It was an incredible moment for us. And then shortly after, they closed a lot of those forestry roads, and so we vowed that we would get back on the trail as soon as it opened in April the following year. So another thing that I wanted to share before we ended this last video of our Georgia section of the Appalachian Trail was journaling and how important it is to keep record of your experience. So Amber has a lot of my mom's journals, and it has her handwriting in it and a lot of her memories from raising all 6 of us children, and a lot of her thoughts. Sometimes she shares spiritual experiences and a lot of laughter too, and so they're priceless to me. And so I had the idea to keep a journal on the trail, and my friend Julie told me about this company. It's called Write in the Rain. You see that? And it is used by scientists as like a field journal because the pages will not deteriorate. And so you can write with like a Sharpie, and you can keep all that information for the generations after you. And so I think that that's definitely something I would like to advocate for, is journaling your experience on the trail. I used to pack this with me some of my trips, and then I decided that it got a little too heavy because we started really calculating pack weight when we would spend more than one night on the trail. And so now I keep notes on my cell phone, and then I come home and I write in the pages all of the experiences we've had.